Hi everyone, and welcome to Project Manager, leader, manager, mentor, and coach, and a little bit about the challenges of leading projects. So this is our first module in class, and let's start with a thought. Perhaps you're already in a leadership role, in which case when you became a leader, did you change? Did you become a different person? Were you all of a sudden really different and all of your beliefs and values completely brand new? I'm going to say probably not. Probably the core of who you are stayed the same. You just had a different perspective. You had a different type of responsibility. What was expected of you changed. I think it's fair to say that. But when that happened, and if you've been through this, you know what I mean, and if you haven't, you probably will experience this a little bit. This is why I bring it up. Somebody might say something to you like, you know, ever since you became a manager, you're different, or why are you so serious now? You don't talk to us anymore. I'm not comfortable being around you anymore because now you're management or now you're the boss. You know, these kinds of things, they do happen. In fact, you know, I can think of a story. Two coworkers, they were both project managers, and they worked together, and they worked in a PMO or a program management office. And they were peers, and so they would talk as peers would do. And, you know, when one needed a break, they might go to the other. So it was a man and a woman. So when she needed a break, she might go into his office just to say hi, and if he wasn't swamped, you know, he would talk. And they would talk about things that weren't necessarily work-related. She might talk about a trip to Europe that her family was planning, and he might talk about bicycling because he was an avid cyclist, and he, you know, rode in centuries and, you know, watched the Tour de France every year and, you know, was very into cycling. And so they would talk about non-work related things. Nothing wrong with that. And then the position for PMO director came open. And he didn't have any interest in it, but she did. So she applied, and she got the job. Well, now she was the boss. And so she became the leader, the boss, the manager of her peer, her friend. Well, things did change. She would come to see him every once in a while when she was new in the position, and she was really coming to see him because, you know, she missed their rapport, and she wanted a break, and she wanted an opportunity to, you know, get away from her desk for a minute. But when he saw her come in the door, all of a sudden he saw her as the boss, and so he didn't know if he should speak to her about cycling or what's happening with the Tour de France or about her plans for her trip, because he felt uncomfortable. And if she walked in the room and he happened to be on the performance cycling, I think that's a website for cyclists, performance cycling website, you know, buying gear, then he felt like he had been caught, you know, like he was in trouble. And so he would be quick to tell her, oh, you know, I'm just on a break, or I'm on my lunch. And so he became uncomfortable. Well, as he became uncomfortable, she became uncomfortable because she noticed that he was acting differently, right? And so she was coming to see him really just to talk as people and not always as the boss, and yet he kind of stiffened up. So who really changed in this situation, right? Who really changed? Well, the truth is they both changed a little bit. Certainly her position and her authority and her responsibility changed, and he responded to that. And so he did see her differently. I mean, he saw her as, this is the person who's going to write my review, and when she was my peer, maybe it was okay for her to know that I was streaming the Tour de France on my laptop during the day. But maybe I don't want my boss to know that. And as he started acting differently, she felt uncomfortable, and so she started acting differently. And so when she came to see him, it was less about social interaction, and it became more about, the formal work conversation. This happens. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's a fact of life. It's something maybe you've already experienced, or it's something you will experience as you go into a leadership position. And it's just very important to understand that when you're a leader, people look at you differently. And as a project manager, are you a leader? Absolutely, you're a leader. Or I want to tell you, you should be a leader. We'll be talking more about that. So the ways in which your team members perceive you as a leader, or let me tell you, they want you to be a leader. They want to be able to see you as a leader. And a project manager who isn't a leader, because you can be a project manager and not be a strong leader, but you'll only go so far. You'll maybe stay with smaller projects, projects that aren't as challenging, projects that don't require you to really motivate others, projects that don't really require you to be a strong visionary out there in front of people. It might be projects that require you to be a better, I'll say, record keeper, a better record keeper. But that doesn't mean you get to abandon your management skills. In fact, I think that project management is one of those unique types of areas where you do need to be both. Certainly there are people who are leaders, they're strong leaders, they're the face. Think of some companies, some people are like, they're the face of the company, they're the face of the brand, they're the relationship manager. You don't look to them for tactical, for day-to-day, and yet as a project manager, you're going to do both. You will need to be a manager where you are going to be more hands-on, more in the tactical, looking at tasks in the schedule, finding out what has happened. That's more of being a manager, and team members see you that way too, and they need you to be that way too. And you know what? Sometimes your team members might see you as a mentor or a coach, and sometimes you might choose to take on, I'll say, a mentoring or a coaching style when you deal with some of your team members. And some of the things that you'll be learning and thinking about in this class is, what style should you use and when should you use it? And together we'll be looking at things like, how do you motivate others, and what approach should you use to motivate others, and how do you navigate conflict, and what approach should you use, and when you are in a negotiation, how do you negotiate? What's the best approach to use? And as a leader, what is your leadership style? And there's a phrase I have, you see it here in front of you, let's use our power for good. And what I mean by that is in your role as project manager, when you're being a leader and a manager and a mentor and a coach, you have tremendous impact on the people who are working with you. You have a lot of influence in how their day goes, if I can say it that way. And so with the leadership comes responsibility, and a responsibility to be a strong, ethical leader. And so I say, when you can, and most of the time I believe you can because you have a say in it, use your powers for good. Okay, so let's look at each of these situations. When are you a leader? Okay, well, leaders set strategy and vision. And so I even have this picture here. Look at it, it's a business person or businessman steering the ship. And when you're using stories to get your point across. And not everything is just about, a status meeting and did you finish your task and did you finish it on time and why not and what does this mean and do we have a budget variance. A lot of your work is about being, strategic and visionary. For example, think about a project kickoff meeting, and you've invited people to the project kickoff, and it's a tough project. You've all been handed something really difficult to do. You have a very tight timeline, and your budget is pretty inflexible. And you're going to be asking people to work overtime, and nights and weekends, and it's going to be tough. In that situation, if you can stand up in front of the room and, pardon the expression, I'll say sell it, explain to people why this is so important. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we are all working together with this tough deadline and this inflexible budget. Because when we do, we'll be the first to, fill in the blank for our customer. And this will bring us other customers, and this could increase, it could be sales you're looking to increase, customer retention you're looking to increase, or maybe you're looking to reduce the complexity of something, or there's a new regulation and you need to be compliant, and if you're not compliant by a certain day, you're going to be hit by a fine. And so there you are, you're at that kickoff meeting and you're telling people about this tough goal that you're all working on, and you're acting as a visionary. Definitely you're being a leader. You know who isn't a leader in that meeting? The project manager who sits there and says, yeah, I don't know how we're going to do it. This is what management wants from us. That's not being a leader, and that's not who I want you to be. Of course I want you to be a leader. Now this means as a leader, because people want certain things from you, that in a sense you're always on. And what I mean by you're always on is people are watching you. Now I mean this in a good way. I don't mean this in a creepy stalker kind of way. I mean, people notice things about you, and as you go up the ranks and you get promoted and you take on projects that are bigger, more important, have more people, impact more people, or you run programs, people become more aware of you. And so as you're walking down the hallways, people are going to know who you are, and they're going to say hi to you, and sometimes you're going to recognize who they are, and maybe at first you don't recognize who they are. And people are going to know things like where you park your car, and when you come in, and whether or not you walk in with, a paper cup from a certain coffee house, and, when you take your lunch, and who you go to lunch with. And so I'd like you to look upon this as a good opportunity, because this is an opportunity for you to be a role model, for you to set an example. Because as a leader, you are setting an example, whether you know it or not. So be aware of it and know it. So, for example, you take your team out to lunch. How did you treat the wait staff? Because that says something about you, and it says something about how you perceive or how you act towards people who you think of as in a position maybe subordinate to you, or definitely serving you, right? Do you always work through lunch? What does this tell your team? Does it make them think they should have to work through lunch? And if you don't expect that of them, then make sure you tell them and explain to them why you choose to work through lunch. Maybe you choose to work through lunch because you want that extra time, because you want to make sure you get on the road in time to be at your son's soccer game. Let people know. What if you're the person that's consistently late for meetings? I used to work for this person. I worked for a couple people like this, actually. That's why this is on here. That's sending a message too, especially if you're this way. You're always late, and whenever you arrive, you insist that everybody stop and back up and start over from the beginning and tell you everything. Yet if you walk in and they haven't started, then you chastise them for not starting. Do you see the message that's being sent there? It's very, it's okay for me to be late, but it's not okay for you to be late. It's certainly not okay for you to not have started the meeting. You need to be productive, but if you've started the meeting, then you need to start it over again when I arrive because I'm so important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So be aware that what you are doing is sending a message. And I don't mean that in a way like freak out, because you're going to have off days, right? Of course you're going to have off days. And so you know what? When you do, don't be afraid to admit it. So if you have a day where things just don't go well, or you become a little bit frazzled, or people see you becoming a little stressy, or you're a little short verbally with someone, just admit that you had an off day, because that shows who you are as a leader too. We want to think about your character and your reputation. And there's something that I learned, a saying I learned. I can't take credit for it. I certainly use it a lot. And the saying is, your character is your own. You decide who you are, right? You decide how you vote, whether you vote or not, how you worship, what day of the week you worship, whether you worship or not, how you want to dress, where you want to live, the kind of car you want to drive. Do you want to give to a charity? What charity do you want to support? Do you want to volunteer? All of these things, you make these decisions about yourself. But your reputation is owned by others. Your reputation is owned by others. And so what I want you to think about is, how are you acting? And does the way you act map to who you really are? Because as a leader, you want who you are to show up in how you act and what you say, so that if you describe yourself a certain way, people see it. And one of the things I say is, think about this. Let's flash forward. It's your retirement. You're at your retirement party. And people are describing you. Are they describing you the way you want to be described? Are the things they're saying that you were famous for when you were working with them, are those the things you want to be known for? So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of responsibility in being a leader. And that's why in our next week, one of the things you're going to take a look at is yourself. But I don't ask you to just do that next week. I'm asking you to always think about who you are and who you want to be as we're going through our materials. And I don't know if you remember Popeye. There he is. You see the picture of Popeye, Popeye the Sailor Man. I won't sing the Popeye song to you. I don't know if I can try to do a Popeye imitation or not. Let's see, where Popeye goes, ooh, sorry, that wasn't very good. But anyway, one of the things that Popeye says is, I am what I am. You are what you are. And that's who you are. And that's great. You bring that as you are a leader. So be aware of who you are, right? All right. When are you a manager? Because I've said that to be a project manager, and look at the name's manager in the title. Sure, you might work at a company that says project lead. Traditionally, we say project manager. Well, when you're a manager, when you are doing things like creating and updating the schedule, when you're working on your budget forecast, when you're being tactical, you're being a manager. And of course, you are expected to be a good manager as a project manager. That's why, aside from this class, you're taking other classes, like you're taking the introduction class where we go through, I call it a mile wide and an inch deep, to learn about what does it mean to be a project manager, what does a project manager do, and that's why you're taking other classes where you're going to do more in-depth focus on risk management and quality and other areas, right? Because it's very important. It's great if you're a good charismatic leader, but if you can't walk into a conference room and explain your schedule and what is the critical path and what does the critical path mean, then you're missing the manager piece. Something that I was taught, I want to put this out there for you to consider. It's a saying or an expression somebody taught me in a class once, and what this man taught me was, leaders speak the language of stories and vision. So leaders speak the language of stories. Managers speak the language of tasks and work to be completed. So you're both. There are times when you're setting the vision and you're using stories to paint the picture of what the team needs to do. And there are times when you are sitting around the table and you are looking at tasks and work and asking, when is this task going to be completed, because it was scheduled to be completed on Friday, and if it goes to Monday, what does that mean? All right, so that's when you are a manager. So who are you? Again, you're both. You are both. Project management is an art and a science. It's an art and a science. And you don't have to, again, you don't have to be a leader, but if you want to move forward, then yes, you do. Absolutely, you do. And as we're going through this class, and there are times when you'll be reading about different theories, and I'll say, you know, motivational theories, and we'll even say, I'll say the science of management. That's great, and it's important to understand these concepts, but the art comes from how you interpret and how you apply them, how you draw upon them. So for example, when you're creating your budget, I want that to be science. When I say I want that to be science, I mean I don't want you to be that person who plays with numbers and comes up with crazy creative numbers that make no sense, so please don't do that. Creating an accurate budget, doing good forecasting, gathering your estimates, getting, you know, and really reporting what is really happening, that is more scientific, right, because you're using math. Now, when you need to come and talk to someone, let's say you need to come and talk to me about the budget, and things aren't going so well, the way in which you decide to approach me and have that conversation with me, now you're drawing from the art. And we tend to have strengths sometimes in one place more than the other, and that's okay. That's another thing for you to think about and know about yourself. If you're better about the science, you're still going to use the art, but just understand that the art is maybe where you spend your time developing. And if you're really good with the art, you're good with the people aspect, and you understand how to speak to people and when, and you're intuitive and you understand how to read people, that's good too. Then you're a person who's going to spend more time learning how to be better at the science. And so I think, as you can tell, because I've already started to say this, one of the things I'm really asking you to do in this class is be introspective. Please take what we're learning, whether you're reading it or writing about it in a forum or writing about it in the case study or in your leadership essay or, you know, watching a video. I want you to be introspective and think, what does this mean for me? How does this apply? How does this impact who I want to be and how I want to be? Okay, because anybody can learn what we're talking about here, of course, and anybody can understand the theories, you know, what are the different theories of motivation, what are different ways to approach negotiation, pardon me, but it's what you do with this information that's going to make or break you as a leader, and that's what's so important. Now, what about mentoring? I also told you your team members think of you as a mentor and a coach. Mentoring is almost like being a counselor, but not, I don't mean like in any kind of like a therapist or a psychological counselor, in a consulting capacity. Maybe that's a better way to say it, consulting capacity. So when you're advising someone and recommending a plan of action, like, so for example, if somebody comes to you and says, wow, how did you get to be where you are? Will you work with me so that I can move forward in my career path too? That's being a mentor. You know, maybe one of your coworkers, a peer project manager, comes to you and your boss has asked them to come up with some ways to explain their budget variances, and this person is new. And so maybe they haven't used the financial reporting system at your company yet. And when they understand what a variance is, they understand, you know, the basics of project management, they just haven't used your system before. And they don't know the process for making budget requests and all those kinds of things. That's an opportunity for you to mentor them, right? And when you do, you're going to use some different tools when you mentor them. So, of course, the first one is listening so that you understand what they're really asking you for. And then you're going to define the request. So you're going to listen and say, okay, so I get it. You're asking me to help you understand how to use the financial reporting system, and pull the right reports so that you can answer the question about the variance. You're not asking me to do your work for you, right? And now you're also, in that way, you're confirming the nature of the relationship. You're saying, I'm happy to teach you or mentor you or guide you through how to use the system around here. And you're acting as a resource. You're providing expertise. And so sometimes you're going to be a mentor. You might do this to some of your team members too. I mean, think of a situation where perhaps, let's say you before you were project manager, you were a business analyst. And so you used to create the requirements. And now somebody else is in your old job. They might come to you for guidance, right? And you're not going to do their job for them, right? You're not, right? Because you know that's not your job anymore. You're not going to do their job for them. So you're going to act as a trusted resource. You're going to make recommendations. You're going to help them. There could be times when you're going to use a coaching approach. When you're acting as a coach, you're not setting the strategy. You're not recommending a plan of action. So when you're mentoring, you're saying, here's what I recommend as a plan of action because here's what worked for me. As a coach, you're guiding somebody through, but you're pulling the answers out of them. And so that's why questions are your primary language. Questions are your primary language. So let's walk through this one. You've got a panicked team member. And they come to you with your one of your least favorite situations, which is, I'm going to be late with my deliverable. Now, part of you inside your head might just freak out because you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're late. They're on the critical path. This is going to make the project late. I want to jump over my desk and grab them by the hair. Don't do that. That's not a leadership technique we'll ever be talking about officially in this class, and I don't want you to do that. So resist your own panic attack and think, is this a time to coach them, to ask them questions? So, for example, they're saying, I know I'm going to miss my deadline. Ask them, why do you know you're going to miss your deadline? Because that why they know they missed their deadline is the key to the whole rest of the chain of events of what's going to happen. I mean, it could be because my boss just pulled me off of the project. It could be because I haven't had a chance to start yet. It could be because I'm supposed to go on vacation tomorrow. I don't know how to do this. This so far is taking me twice as long as I thought, right? And there's all kinds of different reasons it could be. So as a coach, you're going to ask them questions. So again, you're listening, you're using the tool of listening, all right? Now, defining the situation or the goal. Okay, so the situation is you're sharing with me that you're going to be late with your deliverable. The goal was that this would be completed by Friday. That's still our goal. What makes you think you're going to be late? What have you already tried? What do you think can be done about it? How can I help you, or can I find you help? See, so you're asking questions, and it's kind of a, coaching is really about where are you now, where do you want to be, where do you want to be, how will you get there? So of course in this situation we're assuming this person coming to us knows they're probably going to be late, doesn't want to be late, wants to be there on time, and is coming to you for help. So this is an opportunity for you as a leader to step in and coach them about the situation and see if together you can come up with a solution that involves them not being late. Right? So it's results partnering. And so together you are working to meet the result, which is to have the deliverable done on time, completed on time, so that the project isn't late. Something else you're going to draw upon, you're going to be facilitating. You're probably going to facilitate your own meetings. You might facilitate conflict resolution. Perhaps there'll be situations where two team members don't get along or have a difference of opinion, or two customers, two stakeholders might have a difference of opinion. So facilitation is something you will draw upon as a project manager. So let's see, you're a project manager, you're a leader, you're a manager, you're a mentor, you're a coach, you're a facilitator. And so you see all of these different things that you are, all these different hats you wear. There are going to be times in this class where the materials that we're talking about and using are going to speak to these different areas that you're going to be able to tuck them away and use them. So hopefully you'll be able to translate what we're talking about into skills that you are going to be able to use. So facilitation does require listening, and you use feedback, right? And you use questions, but it's not coaching and it's not mentoring. Facilitating means you are, we have a picture of a conductor here, maybe even refereeing. So if you are asked to facilitate a conversation, it means you're being asked to guide, to keep people on point, to help people get what they need out of a meeting or a conversation. So if you take, for example, a status meeting, you have an agenda. Yes, please tell me you have an agenda. Yes, you do. It's a good meeting practice. You need to have agendas. Whether you created it ahead of time or you said when you sat down, here's what we're going to do with our time. You have an agenda, and when you're running your status meeting, you are facilitating people to the agenda with the idea that the agenda has been set up, covers the topics and the information that are needed in order for the team to be able to keep working towards the goal. Okay, let's think of some other things that happen. You've got two team members. They don't get along. So team member A approaches you to talk about team member B. Team member A has had it. They just can't stand to be in the same room as team member B. What are you going to do? How are you going to interact with team member A? I'm purposely being silent to let you think for a second here. I'm not going to give you, here's the right answer. You know why? The right answer comes from just about everything in a sense that we're going to cover in this class. It comes from you understanding who you are, where you lead from, your strengths, your weaknesses. It comes from you understanding team member A and team member B. It comes from you understanding your role, your responsibilities. It comes from you understanding what is considered acceptable in your company, what is the organizational culture, another topic we're going to get to here in a minute. And it comes from how you think you want to resolve conflict. What is your natural go-to style, and does that work here? You might come from a place of negotiation here, because you might have to negotiate with team member A in order to say, you know what, sorry, but sometimes you have to be in the same room as team member B. So issues like this, these are the times when you are applying all of your various leadership knowledge and skills. So do we face challenges? Absolutely, we face challenges as project managers. Doesn't make it not fun. You know what? Because on a good day, the challenges are fun. They're opportunities. They're ways to grow. It's like solving a puzzle. And on bad days, maybe it's tiring, but I hope that you're doing what you love, and so you don't have as many bad days, right? One of the challenges you're going to face is very likely that you might not be the boss. This is the old responsibility versus authority dilemma. You are responsible for meeting the triple constraints. Remember your friends, the triple constraints: scope, cost, and time, right? These are the things you juggle, if you will, on your way to meet the project deadline. And so you have the responsibility, but you maybe don't always feel like you have the authority. And as that is the case, that really means that you need to understand yourself, understand the culture you're working in, and know how to draw upon different ways to negotiate, different ways to solve conflict, the best way to communicate for your environment. When we talk about the fact that you might not always be the boss, Some of the challenges we face vary based on the organizational structure. So a quick reminder, when I'm talking about organizational structures, what I'm really talking about is how is your team organized. And the approaches, the structures you see in front of you here in the bullet points, your company may or may not use these words. These are the standard words that you'll see in our book, that you'll hear from the PMI. If you're a person who's going to take the PMP exam, you'll want to know them this way. And they go like this. When we talk about something being a functional structure, that means we don't set up a special project team. Everybody remains in their current jobs, in their current organizations, and work is handed out to them by their management. So if there's a project, you and I might not ever know that it's a project. So for example, if I work in marketing and you work in accounting, I know that my boss brought me something to work on and that it was a little different than usual. That's what I know. And from an accounting perspective, you know the same thing. Your boss brought you something to work on and it's a little different than usual, and that's what you know. And any coordination that's going on is going on with our bosses. And so as project managers, you and I are pretty much out of the picture. Maybe we're asked to coordinate. Sometimes maybe we'll ask for somebody to be a coordinator just to kind of keep notes and keep status. Now the matrix structure, the matrix organization, this seems to be where most of us live, for lack of a better word. And the matrix organization is very popular because we assign people to multiple projects and they're on loan. So if you're a project manager in a matrix environment, you probably manage multiple projects. Your team members are assigned to multiple projects. Your team members don't really work for you. They're on loan to you from what we call a functional manager. When I say functional manager, I mean someone who is not a project manager, somebody who's what we call more of a line manager. And how you interact has to do with whether the matrix is weak, balanced, or strong. So in a weak matrix, you are in more of a coordinator role. You gather information, you pull together status, you probably maintain schedule, you might update some budget reports. You don't have a lot of say in things. In a balanced matrix, you and the functional manager or managers share responsibility, and generally that means you manage to schedule and scope. They provide the resources. If the resources need help understanding how to do their job or they need training, that goes back to their functional manager. If there are issues about the project, those issues are usually yours. If you work in a strong matrix, the balance of power sits more with you as the project manager. So you have more say. How that looks sometimes is your team is built. You still have multiple projects you're running. Your team members are still assigned to multiple projects. They still have you as a project manager, plus other project managers, and a boss, which, by the way, that's one of the challenges of the matrix, is everybody feels like they have multiple bosses and they don't always know who to make happy. But the person who gives you the resources, you may not interact with them very often unless there's a problem. So you do most of the leading and managing, and the functional manager kind of steps back and says, here's a resource, let me know if there's a problem. And so you can see the challenges that we have there. The challenges that we face are, again, we're not officially the boss. People work on more than one effort. They work for more than one person. And in a perfect world, everything would be so well prioritized that this wouldn't be a challenge. But most of us don't live in a perfect world. And so the challenges you face when you're leading matrix teams is getting enough of people's time and attention, knowing that they're multitasking and that their time is fragmented, and in some cases getting people motivated or getting them to pay attention and follow your lead when they know you don't write their review. And so that's why you'll be wanting to pay attention to ways to motivate people and ways to communicate and how to negotiate, because you're going to be drawing on those skills. Now when we talk about projectized means you are the boss in a sense, because in a projectized structure, everyone is 100% dedicated to the team. So you do have complete say. And having complete say, sometimes it sounds so wonderful, but there are challenges that go with being the boss 100% of the time as well. So, other challenges we face. So we have to work within the structure of the project team. We also have to work within the organizational structure. And you have some other information with our lesson this week, some videos that talk a little bit more about organizational culture. What I'd like to say now is organizational culture, that's the personality of the company. And if you've ever gone someplace and you felt like you didn't fit in, there's probably nothing wrong with you. It was probably the culture. Probably the culture just wasn't right for you. Okay? And if you've ever had somebody come to your company and you see them come in, and sometimes I'm going to say that they crash and burn, it might be because they didn't get to know your company's culture before they started acting. I'm thinking of a specific person. And this person, in her mind, she was hired at this company because they must have really needed her, and she must be really smart, and so therefore she must be smarter than everyone else. So shame on her, a little bit of ego there, right? Just a little bit of ego. And so she came in and started telling everyone why what they were doing was wrong and why her way was so much better. And she could have been 100% correct. I really don't know. What I do know is that she didn't make it at that company, that she didn't make her 90-day probation period. And I strongly suspect that if she had taken some time to get to know the personality of the company and understand how new ideas are presented there and the right way to go about saying, hey, I think there's a better way to do this, she probably would have had a better experience. I can share with you another example. I can remember once I was going on an interview, and as luck would have it, I arrived, it was a Friday afternoon interview, and it was just after lunchtime. And I went up in the elevator to the floor where this company was located, and I was in the elevator, as it turned out, and it was a tall building, so I got to be with them for a little while. Tall building and not a really not kind of a slow elevator, so I got to hear people. They were coming back from lunch. They did work at this company where I was going to interview, and there were probably about 8 of them. So it was also, so look at that. So a tall building, slow elevator, crowded. Thank goodness we didn't get stuck, huh? None of them had a good word to say. They were all very disgruntled. They were unhappy. They were complaining about the fact that they were going to work another weekend. They couldn't remember the last time they had had a weekend off, and some other things. And so I knew by the time I got to the top floor that this was a practice interview for me, and that even if they did offer me a job, I wasn't going to take that job. I wasn't going to take the job. That was me understanding a little bit of the organizational culture about how hard they worked people and how unhappy people were and other things that were happening there. So you need to understand it, because sometimes you're going to work within the organizational culture, and sometimes you need to work around it. Now, working within the organizational culture means recognizing the way things are done at your certain company and why, and following that. And working around it means understanding when it is okay to break the rules and why, and how often you can do it and who can do it, because there are sometimes people who can get away with being different. So organizational culture is very important. It's very important for you to get to know and understand the personality of your company. And then, by the way, some of you at really large companies, you have, pardon me, you have split personalities. I don't mean you, your company. You've got the large company and the personality that your company says it has, and then you might find that sometimes different divisions or business units within your companies have their own personality. So it's really an interesting and important thing. So lots of thinking to be done. And again, I'm asking you to really think about what you learned in this class and how you can really apply it and what does it really mean to you. Because it's one thing to take the class and do well, and I do want you to do well in class, but more importantly, I want you to do well outside of class. And doing well outside of class means taking all of this information in and understanding it so that you can take it and learn it and apply it. Because certainly, yes, in this class, yes, you're going to take a midterm and a final, and yes, you're going to turn in case studies, and you'll be evaluated and graded because this is a class. But the real test is in the real world. And another thought, when you're a leader, again, you're given the privilege and the responsibility and some power with leadership. So please use those powers for good.